In the next story, The Galactic Archive, the location which Dr. Elena Vasquez finds is a weapons research site rather than an archive of ancient knowledge as originally claimed by the human race. The group reverse engineers military technology from dead cultures to make modern weapons, but Elena determines that each culture in the archive had destroyed itself with the weapons they themselves developed. She unearths the truth and spills the beans to the Galactic Council, leaving humankind with the very same choice that wiped out hundreds of thousands of civilizations that came before. The archive's enigmatic builders explain it as a test, and that species must embrace wisdom in order to claim the archive's greatest treasures: art, science, and benign technologies. Humanity passes the test by decommissioning their weapons and turning the archive into an actual center of learning and peaceful cooperation with other galactic races. The story ultimately explains that the archive is both an early warning system and a school that instructs societies in preferring creation rather than destruction. Dr. Elena Vasquez touched her palm to the scanner, the now familiar tingle of quantum recognition rippling through her fingers. With a whisper, the great doors of the Galactic Archive slid open, and she stepped past into the cathedral room that had quickly become her second home in the past 3 years. For most humans, the archive was life's most profound discovery, the combined knowledge of every civilization ever to exist in the galaxy. Elena knew better. She knew what they were up to, really. The usual suspects buzzed around the morning briefing room. At the head of the table sat Commander Jake Morrison, his battle-worn face flicking between holographic images of star maps, weapons, data, and casualty reports from the Outer Rim campaigns. Dr. Sarah Chen, the supposed chief historian of the archive, was already engrossed in her work, her fingers dancing over several data streams that obviously weren't historical data. I was only freshly out of men when your newest recruit, Marcus Webb, was still green enough to soak up the cover story we spoon-fed him about conserving the galactic heritage or some blazer. Elena sat down, aware that Morrison was following her gaze as she did so. Lately, she'd been pushing boundaries, asking questions that made people uncomfortable. Questions about why the department's archival work always appeared to be predicated on nothing but military tech and strategic warfare data found on ghost planets. Folks, Morrison began, his words delivered with the weight of a man who for decades had made life-and-death calls. We've got a situation forming in the Kepler sector. The Zephyrian Alliance has been pushing for more and more territory, and as far as we can tell, it seems they've been experimenting with some type of advanced shielding technology that we can't seem to punch through with any of our current weapons. Sarah leaned in, her dark eyes lighting up with the enthusiasm most people reserved for finding lost art or ancient literature. I've been mining the Meridian Collective Archives. Page 133 of 824. My army. The last time they'd fought a comparable foe was roughly 2,000 years ago, with a race known as the Vorlok who'd employed phase-shift defensive matrices. The created a device called a resonance disruptor that could implode those shields from within. Marcus raised his hand tentatively. Wait, I thought I was a historian. What are we talking about contemporary war for? The room fell silent. Elena saw Morrison's jaw clench and noticed Sarah's fingers stop over her holographic interface. This was what she'd been waiting for, the chink in their perfectly constructed armor. Webb, did you really think what the archive was for? Morrison SETQ_week 33-0-47. Set rotation 20. Don't know. Knowledge, keep. Marcus answered. It was a little shaky, learning from the past, cultural and technological changes in galactic civilization. Elena couldn't help herself. Tell him the truth, Morrison. Tell him what we really are. Like a predator, the commander turned his cold, calculating eyes on her. Dr. Vasquez, I believe you're trespassing. Am I? Elena pushed her chair away from the table and stood up. Marcus, do you know what your job is, really? You're not a historian. You're a weapons designer. We all are. The point of the archive is not to preserve knowledge. It's to harvest it. We're grave robbers, rummaging through the bones of deceased civilizations, searching for ways to kill even more effectively. Marcus scanned the room for contradiction, for someone to rebut that Elena was wrong. Sarah looked away, entranced by her data streams. Morrison's silence was answer enough. The archive has the entire military history of any species that ever existed. Elena went on, her tone growing stronger. Every weapon, every tactic, every new piece of technology that allowed one society to gain an edge over another, and mining it all. That's our purpose. Extracting the knowledge of the galaxy and making it humanity's arsenal. Morrison rose slowly, his figure expanding beneath the ceiling, a cloud about to burst. Dr. Vasquez, stand down. Report to security for debriefing. No, muttered Alina, her hand flitting to her tablet. I've been documenting everything. The weapons we've created, the civilizations we've observed, the technologies we've reverse engineered, and I've been forwarding copies to the Galactic Council. The room erupted. Sarah's fingers danced across her interface as she attempted to trace Elena's transmissions. Morrison snatched his comm unit, yelling security orders. Marcus sat motionless as he grappled with the enormity of what she had disclosed. But Alina wasn't finished. Did you hear about what happened with Meridian Collective, Sarah? The ones whose resonance disrupted you are so excited to recreate. Sarah's hands stilled. They were lost in the war with the Vorlok. No, Elena said, and she whispered it, but it was no less real than any roar. They have perished by their weapon. The resonance disruptor didn't just drop enemy shields, it dropped the quantum field that kept their star system in one piece. 13 billion of them dead in an instant because they believed that they could master the forces of a god they didn't know. Marcus finally found his voice. How many civilizations have we heard from? Lena glanced at him and in his horrified expression saw some of her younger self. Over 400,000, and you know what all of them have in common, Marcus? They're all dead. Every single one. The archive isn't simply their knowledge, it's their failures, their missteps, their warnings about the very technologies we're attempting to recreate. Morrison's security detail showed up with their weapons drawn and not entirely aimed at Alina. She could read the confusion in their eyes. The questions that were beginning to take shape. How long had they been here? How many weapons had they produced? How many people had died as a result of his labor? The Catherian Empire, Alina went on, now speaking to the security team. They created something called a neural cascade virus. From orbit it could zap the nervous system of an entire species. Sarah, you've pored over their biowarfare files for months. Do you want to tell everyone what happened to the Catherians? Sarah's face had gone pale. They experimented on a population of prisoners, but the virus mutated. It jumped back to them. 38 billion people, Alina said, dead in 6 weeks. And their own weapon backfired on them because they thought they would be able to contain biological warfare. A security officer lowered his gun. Commander Morrison, sir, perhaps we ought to hold your position. Morrison snapped. But Alina had seen the doubt creeping into his eyes as well. It took 3 years of collaboration before he finally understood what she had been trying to tell him all along. Then let's go with the hegemony of Drax. Alina kept pushing. They built smart war machines that could reproduce themselves and evolve faster than any defense. They're still out there, Marcus. Still adapting, still destroying. The hegemony built them to win a war that has been over 8,000 years. But the machines have no knowledge of that. They continue to fight, to kill, to spread throughout the galaxy. Marcus's voice was barely audible. How do we stop them? We don't, Alina said. That's the point. Each society within the archive believed it was special. They were the smarter, more careful, more civilized ones than those who came before. They all believed that they could control the power that they were letting loose, and they were all wrong. There was a crackling in Morrison's comm unit. Commander, we're receiving news from the Kepler Erema as the synchrotron developed, or rather, focused. They retrieved images from its buds. Commander, the Zephyrian Alliance has retreated from the disputed regions. They're requesting immediate peace negotiations. What? Morrison grabbed the comm unit. That's impossible. They were winning. Sir, they're reporting that information about Project Resonance was leaked to their intelligence networks. They know we're creating weapons from lost civilization records. They're scared, sir. A cold satisfaction settled in Elena's chest. Zephyrians were not the only recipients of her data dumps. The galaxy's power now knew what humanity was up to inside the archive. They knew about the weapons, the technologies, the dreadful precedents established by every civilization that had walked this awful road before them. You've ruined everything, Morrison said, his voice hollow. Decades of work, years of research. We would have been the most powerful force in the galaxy. Like the Meridians, Elena asked. Like the Catherians, like the hegemony? Yes. We agreed to follow the Europeans' example on that one, and we're in such better shape now than they are, huh? Sarah's face was streaked with tears as she glanced up from her interface. Elena, the quantum resonance cascade. We had fired it, if we had used it in the Kepler sector. 3 binary sets, Elena said softly. The ripple of the gravitational waves would have torn apart 3 whole star systems, 47 billion people. The room quieted to nothing but the whir of the archive's massive computer systems. Marcus was staring at his hands. likely contemplating all of the research he had worked on and projects he had contributed to without even knowing what they were for. Now she was openly crying, the gravity of her work finally catching up with her. Even Morrison looked like he'd aged several years in the last few minutes. There is another thing, and now Elena's voice was nothing more than a whisper. Something I haven't told you. The archive isn't just a warehouse of information, it's a warning system. Every civilization that encounters it has to make the same choice we did, and the archive will, eventually, contain every single civilization that makes the wrong choice until it becomes part of the archive itself. She tapped her tablet, and fresh streams of data materialized in the air around them. Charts of the stars, archaeological surveys, the dust of dead worlds spread through the galaxy. The builders, she said. That's what we call them. The ones who originated the archive. They're not gone there watching. They've been watching us for 3 years, watching us make choices, decisions, watching our slow descent from historians to munitions manufacturers, and if we had crossed that last line, if we had actually used one of these weapons, we would have been just another archive entry, Marcus concluded, his voice full of dread and empathy. Alina nodded. Every society believes that they are the first to discover this. Each one believes itself to be up to the task of the duty, and every civilization that flunks the test makes a cautionary tale for the next one. Morrison's comm unit crackled. Again, Commander, we're getting some kind of transmission from ... Sir, we're not sure. It's from the archive itself, but it's not going through any of our communication systems. Alina smiled grimly. Put it through. The air in the room shimmered, and suddenly they were facing something that could have been otherworldly, or human, or who knows what. The figure was an emaciated giant, and he had transparent skin, eyes that carried the weight of eons. I am Elena Vasquez, the being intoned, its voice carrying overtones that echoed through their bones. Congratulations. Your kind has passed the test. The first test, Morrison managed. The archive contains knowledge, yes, but wisdom with no knowledge is sloth. It is the same choice facing every species that finds ESU's our gift for construction, or use it for destruction. Most choose destruction. They watch the weapons, the technology, the power, and they can't help themselves. The figure now gazed at Alina. You chose differently. You committed yourself to saving, not exploiting, to cautioning and not to weapon. Your species shows promise. What happens now? Sarah said, wiping tears from her cheek. Now you ascertain, the figure replied. The archive has more than warfare technology to offer. It's filled with art, philosophy, science, medicine, engineering techniques that could empower your civilization without eradicating it. But before you can be trusted with such a secret, you must prove yourself. A weight was lifting off Elena's shoulders and she felt something else she hadn't felt for years, hope. What do we need to do? Dismantle your weapons programs. Let's go back to being historians, archaeologists, preservationists. Learn the civilizations in the archive, not for their strength in battles, but for their achievements, their culture, or their wisdom. Learn from their mistakes, but also learn from their successes. The figure made a moving gesture, and around them new data streams materialized. Art from 1,000 worlds, music that crossed species barriers, scientific insights that could add centuries to human life, engineering that could turn deserts into gardens and mend broken worlds. That's what the archive really has, the figure said. And this is the reward for those who prefer wisdom to war. Morrison glanced around the room at his team, his former weapons designers, in a new light. How do we know you are not lying? And how do we know this is just another of those clever tests? The figure grinned, a smile that managed to look all right despite the non-human appearance. Because you're asking the right questions. Because Dr. Vasquez sacrificed it all to avert a disaster. For even now, when presented with the tantalizing prospect of limitless knowledge, you're only thinking about the aftermath. Alina stepped forward. Show us what we can become. The world of the archive changed around them. The sterile factory of research vanished, and in its place stood something more like a university and a community of learning and understanding. The weapons plans faded, replaced by art galleries, concert halls, laboratories not dedicated to killing but to curing the meridians. The figure spoke, developed music that healed their mental wounds, before they went to war against themselves. The Catherians, prior to their plague, practiced a husbandry that could feed entire worlds without burning out the soil. Before their war machines, the hegemony, constructed cities that coexisted in synchrony with their environment. Marcus stood with wonder on his face as he looked at the transformation. All this could have been ours. You can still have it, the figure said, but it must be a choice you make, all of you. The knowledge is here, waiting, but it comes with responsibility. You have to be teachers, and not just researchers. You need to share what you learn, not hoard it. You have to build bridges between species, not weapons to kill them. Alina glanced to the others around the room, working with her, reading the mix of awe and resolve in their eyes that she felt in her own soul. They had nearly succumbed to the same folly as every civilization who came before, but they had blinked, chosen wisdom over warfare. Where do we start? She asked. The figure indicated the mutated archive, with the Alterian Codex, a moral theory of cooperation between species. For a first peaceful alliance, the Meridians used it, before they found the weapons information. Before they forgot that the real source of strength is in coming together, not breaking others. Sarah walked up to one of the new data streams, and had to steady her shaking hand to touch it. This is ... This is beautiful. I've never seen anything like it. Who says that? The figure said. You've been focusing on endings, now you can study beginnings. Bobby Kennedy and the first baby steps toward peace. The discoveries that primarily inspired wonder rather than war. The instances when civilizations decided to construct rather than demolish. Morrison was still grappling with the transition. My commanding officers aren't going to like this. They sent us here to create weapons to put humankind ahead in the game of galactic politics. Then you'll just have to talk them into it, Alina said. Show them what we've learned. Show them the destiny of every empire that took the path of war. Show them that the only way to make it in this galaxy is to turn from conquest to cooperation. The figure nodded approvingly. The Galactic Council has been waiting for you to make this decision. Many of your species have offered to share their knowledge, their culture, their wisdom, but only with those who've shown they can be trusted with such gifts. What about the other humans? Marcus asked. The non-archived ones. How do we persuade an entire species to change its way? Alina smiled, and for the first time in years, she felt hopeful, the same way that we convinced ourselves, by showing them the truth. How? By showing that there's a better way, and that is by demonstrating that knowledge is power, not when you hoard it, but when you share it. Through the weeks that followed, the process continued. The weapons laboratory was transformed into a real university, where human and alien scholars worked in conjunction to unlock the archive's countless cultural secrets. Alina was now hearing poetic from Alterians that would calm violent hearts. Sarah found Meridian farming habits that could feed millions without wreaking environmental havoc. Marcus delved into Catharian medical skills that could wipe out genetic imperfections. The reaction from Earth was predictably divided. Some government officials were outraged that their weapons program had been hijacked, and others were intrigued by the possibilities of peaceful progress. The response from the public had been overwhelming. Mankind was sick of fighting, sick of the threat of war with their neighbors across the galaxy. The Council's response was to the point. A month later, humanity was welcomed as a full member to trade routes, cultural exchanges, and cooperative research projects which had been shut off to them for ages. The other species had been standing by, watching and hoping humanity would make a wise choice over war. Alina stood alongside an observation window of the archive, staring at the stars that did not look so cold and lost anymore. Dozens of ships, from at least a dozen species, were docked at the facility, and their crews cooperated to record or preserve the knowledge of ancient civilizations. And the archive had finally become what it had always been meant to be, not a stockpile of weapons, but a library, a museum, a celebration of the diversity and majesty of galactic culture. Dr. Vasquez Marcus walked up with a datapad packed with everything he could find on Alterian conflict resolution. I've been trying to understand what you were saying. On every civilization repeating the same mistake. Do you believe we're all that different? Alina considered the question carefully. I think we're the ones who finally figured out that we were going in the wrong direction before it was too late. The first of their kind to opt for preservation over exploitation. That has to count for something. The builder figure, Marcus continued. According to it, this was the first test. What do you suppose the others are? Alina smiled at the sight of a mix of human and alien scientists collaborating to translate the poem of an ancient Catharian chant praising the beauty of sunrise on 17 different planets. I think they're all the same test, honestly, between building, destroying, hoarding or sharing, wisdom or warfare, where it will increasingly have to rethink this choice, in one form or another, for the duration of its life as a species. Sarah came up and her face was glowing. Alina, you have to see this. The Meridians had something called symphonic mathematics. They were able to translate complex scientific ideas into music. I have a Meridian survivor who has been helping me. and we believe we can make it a vehicle for teaching advanced physics to children, a Meridian survivor. Elena asked, surprised. The builders rescued delegates from all the various societies before they wiped themselves out, Sarah went on. They're in stasis, in wait of a species that would be sufficiently advanced to learn from their mistakes. Like it or not, we're going to be the first to wake them up. Elena felt the hairs on her neck stand on end. 13 billion people when the Meridians destroyed their solar system, and there are survivors. Not many, Sarah admitted. Perhaps a few thousand from each culture. But they were the ones who attempted to block weapons development, warned their people about the dangers. They're the ones who decided on wisdom, not war, just as we did. Marcus looked thoughtful. So we're not only inferring from the dead, we're learning from the ones who attempted to prevent the deaths. Elena nodded, comprehension forming in her brain. The archive is not just a library, it's a haven for the prudent, a retreat for those who favor conservation over destruction. And now we're in that community. For the next several months, the archive was a real university of the galaxy. Students, human and alien, studied with alien and human professors, who could exchange ideas and insights that had been impossible when each species was confined to its own corner of the galaxy. The weapons research was scrapped, to be replaced by cooperative projects that addressed galactic problems including climate restoration, disease prevention, and sustainable resource management. Elena suddenly became the new director of the archive. Responsibility she never imagined. Now she had to shepherd not only human researchers, but delegates from dozens of species who had arrived to learn from the preserved wisdom of their forebears, and in ways she had never anticipated. The work was hard. Every species came with its own cultural perspectives, its own prejudices, its own temptations to privilege military applications over peaceful ones. But they also brought alongside their own wisdom, their own sui generis approaches to problems that had stumped scholars for millennia. One day, as Elena was reading through some applications for a new joint research project on interspecies communication, Marcus raced into her office, practically trembling with excitement. Elena, you have to see this. The hegemony survivors, they've been collaborating with our engineers, and they believe they can reprogram the self-replicating war machines. Elena's blood ran cold. Marcus, we've been through this. The weapons technology, no, not as weapons. Marcus cut him off. As builders, and the self-replication technology that made them so deadly needn't be just about war. It could build habitations, shape worlds, build infrastructure across the galaxy. This, the hegemony remnants know how to handle, how to program them with peaceful commands. Elena leaned back in her chair, digesting what she was hearing. The machines that tore down the hegemony were capable of restoring worlds. That's exactly what they're saying. The survivors have spent thousands of years in stasis, maintaining the issue. They know how to take the most destructive technology in galactic history and they can make it the most constructive. It was the very essence of the choice that faced every civilization. The same technology that could destroy could also create, if wielded with wisdom instead of war. Elena agreed to the project, but it would be under strict supervision, closely monitored, and completely under the control of the Galactic Council. The first test was 6 months later. An outer rim world, ravaged by industrial pollution and environmental collapse, has nominated itself to be the open expanse. The reprogrammed machines need to test their new programmed functions. Elena monitored the progress from the archive, where she witnessed the small constructors fan out over the face of the planet. But instead of consuming and destroying as they had done for 1,000,000 years, the Sentinels were working to repair and rebuild. Within a year, the dead world had turned green. They cleared the air, renewed the land, constructed cities which were sustainable, and reverted to a scale of living in balance with an ecological healing. The technology that had brought death to a galaxy had brought life to. Elena waited in the center chamber of the archive, ringed by emissaries from hundreds of species, observing the live feed from the one regrowth salvage that had not yet been turned off. Children were playing in forests that had been toxic wastelands only months earlier. The hegemony survivors openly wept at the sight of their technology being used to make and not destroy. Dr. Vasquez, the builder, appeared next to her, the figure more substantial than she had ever seen it. Your kind never cease to amaze. Us, we're learning, Elena replied. From you, from the survivors, from one another. Finally, we are learning what exactly the archive is for. And what is that? Elena indicated the varied beings surrounding them, humans and aliens collaborating, passing on information that had been hoarded for centuries, employing the accumulated wisdom of the galaxy to address challenges that had once seemed intractable. not the past that you're preserving, she said. It's about building the future. Each civilization that fell, every error that was committed, everything wrong that led to annihilation, it's all in their lesson book. Teachers, guides that offer to show us how to choose differently. The builder figure smiled. You understand. The archive is not some kind of museum of the dead. This is a school for the living. You, Dr. Vasquez, have become one of its best teachers. Alina glanced about the room and saw the words had the ring of truth in the faces she read around her. Human students who learned alien music that might heal trauma. Alien hackers exploring art created by humans, which expressed emotions not even yet conceived by their race. Weapons engineers of your teaming up with the descendants of long dead. Civilizations to make weapons of war into weapons of peace. All had made the same fateful decision that had beset every earlier civilization. They all, in the end, stood at the crossroads between wisdom and warfare, between building and destroying, between giving and hoarding, and every single one of them had picked a different option. The archive was all things, every scrap of wisdom ever known to the species crammed into a single mad thought. The experience of a galaxy older than humans back beyond the first stirrings of life, but most critically, it held the decision. The age-old choice of creation versus destruction, cooperation versus conquest, the future versus the past. Alina grinned as she watched a dozen young humans and aliens collaborating to translate an ancient Altarian text on the mathematics of harmony. They were constructing something new, something that had not existed before, a genuinely galactic civilization, founded not on accumulated power but on collective wisdom. The archive contained everything, and mankind at last had learned to control it wisely.